Welcome back into another episode of the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts. That's RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Thursday, April 10th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Currently watching Hiroshi Tai play in the Masters. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Hoping he can do as well as he can. It's always tough for an amateur out there at Augusta, but we're going to dig in more of that. But RJ, how you doing, man?
Feeling great. I mean, again, as always, we got a lot to talk about. People wouldn't think spring. You got a lot of Georgia Tech athletics, but we're gearing up for a big weekend, Georgia Tech spring game, and we'll get into that and more.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty to talk about across multiple sports, not just in one sport. But our main topic today is going to be just previewing the white and gold spring game coming up on Saturday. Very excited to be back out there at Bobby Dodd. So we'll definitely dig into more of that. But the usual stuff right off the top. If you're new to this channel, watching us for the first time, would love it if you guys would subscribe. Leave a comment below. Just, we love reviews. We love feedback. Love hearing back from you guys. Like the video if you could. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review over there. Whatever you think this episode deserves, we would appreciate it, and we thank you guys always for listening. We have our longtime listeners, and we know we're always bringing people in. Like, this channel slowly growing, and we love talking Georgia Tech and all that kind of good stuff. So definitely shout out to you guys for helping us continuing to grow this channel. Before we dig into the spring game, though, we got a few quick hitters. Like we said, Hiroshi Tai,
Yeah.
Georgia Tech's own Hiroshi Tai, is playing in the Masters currently. I don't have the leaderboard pulled up. I think when I last saw, he was 2 over. I know he did get into the top 10 when he was on the front 9. I mean, he was at 1 under at one point, but I do believe he fell back just a little bit. It's so awesome to see him playing in that, and it's tough for an amateur out there. Like, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a golf expert or anything like that, but Augusta is obviously a super challenging course, especially for somebody that's never played it before. So hopefully, he can make the cut and hang around on Saturday and Sunday, and see what happens. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, he's really close to the cut now, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously he just had a double bogey on the last hole. I was just checking it out. But, to be an amateur and to, even be under at any point, like, that's impressive. And he's holding his own against, you know, the best golfers in the world and the best course in the world. So pretty impressive regardless of what the result is.
Yeah. In baseball, we were not going to dig into the whole Auburn game. Like, that was at least, they battled back, after getting up the grand slam in the first inning, fell down 4-0, then it was 5-1, go back up 7-5, and then kind of give the lead away at the end. That's tough, but they get Cal this weekend. Cal is not one of the better teams in the ACC. They're not terrible. Like, it's not like just a slam dunk sweep of a series, but Georgia Tech is the much better team on paper. We'll discuss that in next week's episode. In women's basketball news, women's basketball has a new head coach. When our last episode, we were talking about the retirement of Nell Fortner, and Maryland assistant coach Karen Blair is now taking over. I was there at her introductory press conference the other day. She knows she's in for a challenge. Obviously, she talked about facing NIL, transfer portal head on. We've talked about a lot of this roster has gone into the transfer portal. There's not a lot left, and again, she has a challenge to kind of build this thing almost from the ground up. Like, that might be crazy to say for a team that started off as well as Georgia Tech did, and made the NCAA tournament, but they are having to rebuild this thing a good bit. So we'll see how she does. It could be a rough year one, but anything is possible. We'll see how that goes. And finally, before we get to the spring game, a little bit of football news, some very interesting football news. And I know one, I think I won't speak for all Georgia Tech fans, but I think most Georgia Tech fans are pretty excited to see that a new home and home series with Tennessee was scheduled yesterday. It's going to start next year. They'll play in Atlanta, which I'll get back to that in a second. So it's in Atlanta next year. 2027 is up in Knoxville. They canceled the game with Georgia State. Georgia Tech was supposed to go to Georgia State and play the Panthers. Of course, we know they played this past season. Georgia Tech won 35-12. I think the thing I'm interested to see, it hasn't been confirmed or said by anyone of note that I know of as of the recording of this podcast, so hopefully nothing changes by then. There is a chance I think that game could be in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I know Georgia Tech obviously plays there. annually. They've done so since making that deal a few years ago. They played Georgia, of course, on Black Friday this year. I've said my piece on that kind of thing. I think from a business point, it does make some sense. I know it can suck for the fans, and I do sympathize with that point of view as well. But I do think this could be a super fun series. And my final thought before I turn it over to you is the 2027 Georgia Tech non-conference schedule is insanity. I
Yeah.
know Georgia Tech fans are like, so what about a tough schedule? Like they've been through the ringer so many times through the years, but at Tennessee, at Notre Dame, and against Georgia. And I mean, you have Arkansas State too. I don't know how good they'll be. I mean, they're a pretty good Sun Belt team, but obviously they're far behind Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Georgia. That's going to be very, very challenging. Obviously, it's 2 years away, so we don't know what any of these teams look like. But just on paper, man, that's brutal. But I'm also, it's fun. It's two fun college football programs within close proximity of each other who have played before. I know we all remember the last time they played, 2017 Labor Day night. That was, I'm not going to dig into old wounds there, but I think it's going to be super fun. That's my take.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity. Again, am I sad for, Georgia State fans, everybody Georgia State, a little bit, because I understand, how cool it is to have a Power Five team uh, come to your stadium. Obviously, when you don't get that opportunity very often, having the Marta Bowl at Georgia State would have been cool. But you just can't pass up on an opportunity like this. You're playing one of the top SEC schools. This is not Vanderbilt, even though they had a great season last year. This is one of the top brands in college football, let alone the SEC. And I think you give yourself a great opportunity for TV revenue. You give yourself a great opportunity to have Georgia Tech on a national stage. Again, all due respect to Georgia State, I think Georgia Tech versus Tennessee is a much more intriguing matchup to the average college football fan than Georgia Tech, Georgia State. So this is going to put Georgia Tech on a lot of TV screens across America, and I think it's a win-win for Georgia Tech and Tennessee. It's a resume builder if Georgia Tech wins, and if Tennessee wins, they could see that as a pretty strong non-conference win, and I like the idea of renewing the rivalry. So there's just a lot of pluses to this. I think it's a great decision. Jay Bat's cooking.
Yep. I mean, I was speaking about the 2027 non-conference. Like 2026 is no cakewalk either because you still got to play Georgia, obviously, in Athens. You get Tennessee at home in Atlanta, and you have to play Colorado. Now, I mean, Colorado's kind of the wild card in there with Deion Sanders as a head coach. Like he has an ability to pull players. It's obviously different without the guys that they had this past year, and we're going to get to see them up close and personal. Man, it's almost just 4 months now. It's getting closer, but we still got a little bit to go. Yeah, I just thought it was a super fun series. Can't wait for it. Can't wait to go to Knoxville. I've actually never covered or been to a game at Neyland Stadium, and I've always wanted to, and I'm super excited about that. I have covered baseball there. When Georgia Tech played in the Knoxville Regional in 2022, 3 years ago, I was there for that one. A heartbreaker of a loss for those that do remember that one. I mean, it's not that long ago, so I'm sure you do. But Knoxville is a fun place. Super excited to go back in a couple of years. That's all I have on that. You good?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, let's talk about some actual football being played on the field this upcoming weekend. So, spring practice has been going on for the past few weeks. You had a weekend there where there was spring break and there was no football being played. But we are going to get to see this version of Georgia Tech, the 2025 Yellow Jackets, on the field this Saturday. I kind of say that term loosely just because the transfer portal does open next week, and I know that's annoying, and it is what it is, but it does open next week. So this is not like the finalized version. You could have some guys go out, have some guys come in, I'm sure. So we'll get to see what the finalized roster looks like here in probably a month is more or less what it'll be. But let's talk about the guys that'll be on the field on Saturday. We'll kind of do it how we normally do it. Spring games you have to preview, I think, a little differently just because some of these veteran guys are not going to play or anything because I think we would all agree, like, I don't know what we need to see from Haynes King Saturday, if anything at all. Especially for a guy that did battle injuries this past season. So it's like I think a lot of like the veteran players who have played a lot. I'm not saying they're not going to play, and it doesn't matter that what they do, but it's the guys that we have a more of a feeling for. A lot of the times, I think most people would agree that spring games are a lot of the time for the freshmen, for guys kind of stepping into roles for the first time this year. And we have plenty to talk about when it comes to that. And let's start off with quarterback. To me, this is pretty simple. I don't know if most people will fall in line with me, but I think Graham Knowles is the guy I'm kind of just excited to watch this Saturday. Brent Key and Chris Winkie and Buster Faulkner have all gone out of their way to praise Knowles, as have the quarterbacks. When we talked to both King and Philo earlier in the spring, they both talked about the leaps and bounds that Knowles has made. He's obviously a very toolsy prospect, tall guy, rocket arm. We covered him last year. He got to play a little bit in last year's spring game as well. Grady Adamson's not on campus, the incoming freshman. So you're probably going to get to see a whole lot of Graham Knowles on Saturday. And he's the guy I'm most anxious to watch. I know Haynes King and Aaron Filer are out there, but again, we've seen those guys. I don't know how much Haynes King is going to do personally. I think Philo will probably still do a pretty good bit, but Knowles is kind of like the unknown, like the guy you want to see do a little something, and he's kind of the first name that comes to mind on the offense on Saturday. You have a different opinion?
Yeah, no, I think we're kind of in the same boat there. You are going to see a little bit of Ben Guthrie too. I think you're going to see a lot of
Sure.
Graham Knowles. I think you're going to see a lot of Ben Guthrie. But with only 4 quarterbacks on roster, I don't see Haynes King and Aaron Philo playing a ton. So you're going to get these 2 guys, getting to show off against college level talent. And I think, like you said, I think Graham Knowles has all the tools. I think he could be like an Elko situation last year where he's that spring game MVP.
Yep. And we're going to get to him in just a second. But any other thoughts on quarterback? I know it seems like we're always short on quarterback. It's just it's almost a blessing. Like
Yeah.
it's just we just know what we have there, and you're kind of looking to see what more of what you don't know. Like we loved Graham Knowles as a prospect, just haven't got to see him in action much outside of the spring game last year. So definitely excited for that. Running back, sort of similar as to what we normally say. Like again, we know what Jamal Haynes is and what Jamal Haynes does. So I don't. He's another guy I don't know how much he'll do Saturday, especially since he was banged up a little bit last year. Did have Anthony Carey go in the portal. We talked about that a little bit last time. But guys like Trelane Maddox, who have had good springs. I know Brent Key has talked about him every time they've had a scrimmage, and he meets with us afterwards. He talks about him. Um, you know, uh, who was I going to say? Oh, JP Powell, the freshman, some of the younger guys back there. This will be their first chance to shine. Those are the guys I'm kind of looking forward to because, we only saw Maddox in kind of glimpses last year, and he is a physically imposing back and kind of brings a little something differently. And then JP Powell is like the exact opposite. Like he is just like pure speed. Like he can, hit the hole and he can be gone in an instant. And that's kind of, I'm looking to see maybe if he can do that on Saturday.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm looking for. This Georgia Tech running back room, a lot of these guys play very similar roles, just like you were talking about. Now that Anthony Carey's gone, there's only one running back that's over 5'10", and that's Trey Maddox, and he's 6'1". So you have a lot of guys that fill a lot of similar roles. The 2 guys I'm going to be looking at mostly, though, is Malachi Hosley. Could be a very big impact transfer this year. And then, see what Trey Maddox can do. Again, like he brings a different feel to this Georgia Tech running back room that feels like a lot of the guys are very similar and they're all very good at what they do. But Trey's that 6'1" beast of a back.
Yeah. Also, Dalen Gordon, the walk on, he's been with the
Mhm.
program for a little bit. I think he'll get a little action on Saturday. It's still just trying to figure out the pecking order behind Jamal Haynes, and I think it's going to be multiple guys. I don't think it's just going to be one guy and nobody else plays. Just kind of that's what I'm looking for Saturday. Any other running back notes?
Got nothing.
So receiver's been a little bit of a thin position this spring, just with some guys being out. Eric Rivers has not been practicing. He's not going to play. I don't think so on Saturday. Malik Rutherford's back. We've talked a lot about Isaiah Canyon, Dean Patterson, the other FIU transfer. Zion Taylor is a guy. Zion Taylor and Bailey Stockton are 2 guys I'm very interested in Saturday. They're 2 guys that Key has talked about a lot during the spring scrimmages. Now, Taylor, he was a recruit a couple of years ago. He stayed within the program. This is his third season. Hasn't really got on the field much. I mean, the most he's really played, he got about 14 or 15 snaps against Vanderbilt. I liked him as a prospect. Georgia Tech's been pretty deep at receiver the past couple of years, so he's just had a chance to sit back and develop. I think he could make some plays definitely on Saturday. Um, you on the same wavelength there?
Yeah, well, the one guy that I'm going to be looking at wide receiver is Trey Horn. Again, kind of similar to running back. I like guys that are out of the ordinary for his position. He's a very physically uh, dominant guy. Looked like that out of high school, and I think he can make some big plays. He's going to be my. I don't know if we're going to do MVP predictions, but if we're making one, he's going to be my MVP prediction. I think he'll get a lot of looks out there, and honestly, we don't really know how wide receiver is going to shake out. There are a lot of guys at the top that I'm pretty confident about. We're not going to see Eric Rivers, unfortunately, but Dean Patterson can show his skills, Stockton, and a lot of those guys at the top. So wide receiver, I think, will be a position where you will see all types of players play. You're going to see the top guys that are going to start. You're going to see guys, all the way down the depth chart, and I think that's a good thing to have at a position.
Yeah, and we were just talking about Chris Elko just a second ago.
Oh, yeah.
Brent Key announced he was put on scholarship last year, and that's awesome to see. Like Elko, just super hard worker. Like he's been out there on special teams. A lot of us remember the big plays he made in the spring game last year. Just awesome. Those kind of stories are always awesome to see across college football. It all honestly feels like you see less and less of that. But also David Prince, who was recruited as a tight end to Georgia Tech, he's been out there at receiver. Trent McKnight talked about that a couple days ago when we met. He met with us, I believe it was on Tuesday, and kind of mentioned that. I don't know if he's going to be a contributor this year, but I can tell you he does possess a lot of size. I think it's just going from tight end to receiver and just all the changes that come with that. I'm excited to see if he does anything on Saturday because, like I said, he does bring a lot of size, and I think he can be a one-on-one jump ball kind of guy in a shorter area. I don't think you're going to go vertical to him in those kind of scenarios right now, but I'm anxious to see kind of how he does, how they use him. It's just an interesting position. I think they like a lot of these guys that they have. It's just kind of determining the pecking order of kind of who's where.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a reverse Avery Boyd situation, where you have a very physical guy, going from tight end to wide receiver instead of the other way around.
Yep. But anything else wide receiver you want to talk about?
God
All right,
knows.
we'll move along to tight end. You know, Luke Harpering, I think, is a guy I think a lot of people want to see. Flashed a little bit last year, wasn't like heavy in the rotation. JT Byrne is a guy I know tight ends coach Nathan Brock and both Brent Key they both praised him a lot. I think, we talked about this when he announced he was transferring to Georgia Tech and kind of what his role is. He seems like he's talked about it. When he was considering transferring to Georgia Tech, he watched a lot of film of Jackson Halls and just how violent of a blocker he is, and like that's what he wants to do, and that's kind of the role he wants to play. And we mentioned that is like that's probably what he's being brought in for. Now, it's going to be hard to draw any conclusions about that on Saturday. Like it is a spring game, but those are kind of two guys I've got my eye on at the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to talk about JT Byrne. Again, we talk about tight end all the time. There's going to be four, maybe more guys playing on a regular basis. But JT Byrne, we haven't had, where we don't have a guy to replace that blocking role fully, and I think JT Byrne could be that. And we've seen how Georgia Tech tight ends in the past have blocked really well, and maybe found themselves on their way to an NFL roster. And I think JT Byrne starts in spring, but he's got to finish in the fall. Could give himself a good opportunity to, be with these NFL teams. They love a blocking tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what's going to get Jackson Hall drafted here in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. So, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of mix and match some guys out there. Like I'm definitely going to be intrigued by how they do that and kind of who's out there and whatnot. But anything else at tight end? That's another position I think they feel pretty good about right now. So let's go to the offensive line. Wrap up the offense with that. Now, I think most people know where this discussion is going to go. It's going to go to right tackle. I mean, that's the position battle we've kind of been talking about pretty much the whole offseason. Jamison Riggs, I'm guessing, is the guy that's going to get the first go at it. The other offensive lineman, I think I won't say set in stone, but obviously Keelan Rutledge, Joe Salar, Ethan McKinney's played a lot of football at left tackle. Harrison Moore played some last year. I think I could expect him to take over at center. But the right tackle spot is just one I know a lot of Georgia Tech fans are intrigued by. Jeep Wade's talked about it. Brinke's talked about it. And it's also just the overall pass protection. I'm going to repeat myself several times over. Like, I know it's a spring game and it's going to be hard to just draw any concrete conclusions, because that's going to be something, I'll mention at the end. Just, I wouldn't have any sweeping takeaways from what happened Saturday, but I do want to see how they do in pass protection, because it's been
Yeah.
something that Keys mentioned a couple times after both scrimmages. Is I know after the first one, like the pass protection was not great. I think it did improve last Saturday. We'll see how it goes. This upcoming Saturday, but definitely, I just want to see how they do in that. See how the right tackle rotation works out. Obviously, Josh Petty is somebody we're all going to be watching closely and see where he's at. All those young offensive linemen. I mean, like, Tech brought is a really really good offensive line class. This will be kind of their first chance to showcase their skills, and other guys too, like a Benjamin Galloway or Tana or somebody like that, kind of fighting for position and depth and all that kind of stuff. This will be their chance to do it. But yeah, the right tackle position and how the freshmen do is definitely going to be what I have my eye on.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the right tackle position. It's one of the most important positions on the offensive line, and that's just it's not fully shaken out right now. And I think this spring game is going to be an opportunity for some guys. Like I want to see what we have in Andrew Rosinski. Obviously transferred in from North Carolina. Could have been a guy that they looked at to get some downs, and I want to see him prove himself. Tana, not going to attempt the last name. Again, is another guy who is playing at a very thin position in center. Like there's not a lot of options there, and I think he can kind of set in stone his role. He did get into some game action last year, and the spring game is just more reps for these guys to get, and this is probably the biggest platform they're going to see all the way until fall. So especially at offensive line, there's so many new additions, so many high school recruits, so many guys that transferred in, in years past. I just
Yeah,
want to see some guy come in and make a difference.
yeah, for sure. So just like for me, an offensive overview, like I think is Graham Knowles and the offensive line are probably the two things I'm most intrigued by. You?
Yeah, I kind of want to see the depth at wide receiver because, again, that's another one. I don't know how entirely that's going to shake out, and you got a lot of different options. Like I think there's a lot of guys that fit in that wide receiver 2 spot. So, I think we'll get a better idea after the spring game how the wide receiver position looks.
All right, well, let's transition over to the defensive side of the ball. This will be the first sort of game action we get to see Blake Gideon be as defensive coordinator. Obviously, Kobe Jones is the new corners coach. So it's intriguing. I'm kind of interested to see like what Gideon is doing on Saturday, because he's not your typical deep. I won't say that, but like he doesn't coach a single position. Like he talked about it. He labeled it like the walk around defensive coordinator. He's just doing a lot at once. I kind of want to see how he does that on Saturday. Is it going to be like preview of what he does, during the fall? I'm sure it's not going to be exactly the same, because spring games and the fall are different. I know that. I'm just kind of interested to see how he handles his duties when it comes to the coaching staff. But start with the defensive line, which I think has been a question mark. I think fair to say that we've had. They've brought in a lot of guys. They have a lot of young guys. I'm kind of just seeing how it looks, because you're just losing so much, so many snaps. And Jordan Vandenberg is back, but it's okay. Who else is gonna step up elsewhere? You brought in some transfer defensive ends with Braden Manley, AJ Hoffler. You have young guys like Amontre Bradford. Andre Fuller's made some plays in these games. Um, Christian Garrett is the 4-star freshman. He's out there. UCF transfer Matthew Alexander. I just don't know what this rotation is going to look like and where they're going to have guys. This is going to be our first chance to see it, because I think at minimum you knew last year, like, okay, you have Zeke, you have Machias, you have these guys, like, kind of how things are going to go. Maybe not the exact snap count or anything, but you kind of knew where some pieces fit. And again, the spring game is not like the final answer on that, but it's like a first glimpse at what we're going to see possibly in the fall.
Yeah, and continuity is talked about a lot with the transfer portal opening, and the defensive line position. You got a lot of new guys in there. Like Ronald Triplett's another guy
Yeah.
from UT. There's a lot of different options that I think they can go, and I want to talk about Gideon here for a little bit. I don't really know how much they're going to show in the spring game because we did our spring game preview last year and we said they're probably not going to show a lot. But Buster Faulkner brought out some pretty crazy plays in the spring game, and I wonder if Blake Gideon is going to have some pretty interesting
Just on
looks.
that point, I was going to say, I don't know if it was last year or Key's first spring as the head coach, where he come in there and told us we played literally one coverage. We didn't blitz. We didn't do any of that. And I think it'll be more of the same. That's why if there's some big plays allowed on defense, I don't think it should be a sign as, oh my God, the defense, this is a disaster. Just they're not going to do anything. I am very confident in. I hated to interrupt you, but I just did want to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to let the kids have fun. It's not going to be, you're not going to see some ridiculous formation. You're not going to see a ton of crazy plays. If you do, they'll probably be on offense. You're going to see some big catches. You're going to see some big runs. But yeah, I want to see if we will get a look at the defensive line rotation, if we'll have an idea of what that's going to look like, or if it's just going to be a free for all because you got about 20 defensive linemen on that roster and you got to throw them all out there.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah.
Anything else on the defensive line?
Got nothing.
Linebacker has been the position we feel most confident about, and I feel the exact same way after hearing new linebackers coach Darius Eubanks, who also is going to be coaching in his first spring game at Georgia Tech after coming over from Georgia Southern. We felt pretty good about these top six guys. I mean, Kyle Eford, EJ Lightsey, Tajay Butler, Melvin Jordan, Cayman Spalding, like all those guys. That's a pretty good just top line group, and I think I don't know that much is really going to change in between that. Again, I'm kind of just interested to see how the rotations look. Like, how many guys play a snap here? Is there anything different? They moving guys around, or do they do anything? It's a new defense, and again, back to the point of I don't think they're going to show just a ton, but I just see what happens. Like that's my mantra for a lot of the spring game. Just kind of see how rotations shake out, and what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot really the top guys can show me that they haven't already proven at Georgia Tech or elsewhere. I do want to look at some of the transfers, see how that's going to shake out. But I'm looking more at guys like Jack Collins and Drew Cohen that, again, are going to have a lot of playtime in the spring game and can make a name for themselves. And I think these defensive guys take pride in this spring game a little bit because they can you can show a lot in a spring game. So can offense too, but these guys are going to get reps, a lot of them against guys they see on a day-to-day basis. So it's pretty enticing for these guys.
Yep. Anything else at linebacker?
Nope.
All right, we'll go to finish up the defense with the secondary. Again, another position group that brings back a good bit of experience. Clayton Powell-Lee's back. Amari Harvey's back. Rodney Shelley's back. Omar Daniels is back. Syed Gibbs is back. Zach Toby is back. We've talked a lot about Tay Harris, and this will be kind of the first chance you get to see him in action. I'm excited to see that. And again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but just seeing how some guys get in there and see, if there's any different rotations, kind of where guys are playing, if they could try to experiment with guys at different spots or anything like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for in the secondary. And we've talked a lot about, the cornerback battle to start opposite of Harvey, losing Warren Burrell, also losing LaMiles Brooks back there in the secondary, two experienced guys. But again, there are plenty of snaps coming back, and I feel pretty good about this area. Corey Peoples loves the depth that they have there. And also Brent Key has talked a lot about Elgin Sessions, the true freshman defensive back. I know a lot of we all talk about Tay Harris a lot, but Elgin Sessions has been a standout in the spring so far. So I'll definitely see, if he can make any plays. But anything different for you?
Yeah, one guy I'm going to look out for is Daquan White. Again, like we talked about, it's probably going to be one coverage. You're not going to see some fancy things on the defensive side of the ball, and he's one of those guys. He's an elite cover corner. Came from Eastern Michigan. I obviously, lived very close. Got the chance to see him in game, and he is elite. He is exactly what they've been talking about all off season. And again, this is his opportunity. Cornerback, again, like defensive line, linebacker. If they ever see the quarterback, they are not going to touch him. wide receivers, they can have a little bit of contact. So I think Daquan White can show what he can do. And I'm very excited about him next year, but I'm very excited about him in the spring game. If I had to choose a guy I would predict to be the defensive MVP, I would say Daquan White. I don't know if you share the same sentiment as I do.
Um, I actually didn't have a defensive MVP in my head. I let's hit special teams and then we'll
Okay.
kind of touch on that. I mean, unless you got anything more in the secondary,
Nope.
man, it would be like for like one play, Gideon should just exotic blitz this thing, like just bring something wild, just to start the spring game off, and then all right, play cover three, back off, play cover three the rest of the time or something along those lines. But so special teams, Marshall Nichols, the new punter. I'm hyped up to see the new punter. Brent Key is hyped up this new punter, and so I'm excited to see this new punter. He's talked about him a lot this spring, replacing David Shanahan. Look, I'm also, can Aiden Burr hit another 60-yard field goal? Is he going to get the chance? I wonder if they'll kind of, one of the things about spring games and what they did last year was you had going different scenarios, like let's, line up on the goal line or line up and do all this kind of stuff. And, I want to see him maybe put Aiden Burr in some tough situations kicking wise just to see, because he did have his struggles last year. He's had his moments as well, but he's also had his struggles. I kind of want to see if they put him in some different scenarios or something along those lines. But I mean, Marshall Nichols, that's the guy to watch on special teams, right?
For sure. I want to see. This is one thing I think about a lot. Case Adams, his secondary position is long snapper. I want to see if he'll get some long snapping reps. Obviously, I think they will try and put Aiden Burr in a situation. Obviously, they're not going to intentionally stall out a drive, but if they're looking at a 60 to 65-yard field goal, I see no reason why they wouldn't throw Aiden Burr out there. We saw, I mean, that was fun last spring, and I think they could do the same thing again. I'm just happy that heading into the spring game, we know who's the kicker, we know who's the punter, and we got nothing to worry about there.
Absolutely. So I guess let's wrap it up here. We'll give out, I guess, our offensive and defensive MVPs. I'm gonna stick with Graham Knowles on offense, and defense, I'm gonna go with Tajay Butler.
I like that pick. I'm gonna stick with my same guys. I got Trey Horn and Daquan White, my guy from me and you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else spring related we need to talk about?
Nothing I can think of.
All right. Well, I hope y'all will come out to the game Saturday. I will be there. It's going to be awesome. Just, last little taste of football before we get into some like actual real football later on in July and August. But the white and gold spring game is always fun. When I've gone and covered them the past, this will be my third one, because when I was hired, they had just finished up their spring practice then. So this will be my third spring game I get to cover, and it's always fun. Like, it's always fun to be out there, and it's a privilege to get to cover it. And then looking forward to doing it again. But appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, hope to see anybody out there Saturday. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, subscribe, like the video if you're watching it right now. If you haven't already done it already, I know a lot of you guys already do that, but if you're following us on podcast, leave us a review. Appreciate all the support you guys have shown. We're heading into summer, got a lot of good stuff, coming up. Baseball is off to a hot start. I know they've had a couple bumps in the road the past couple weeks with Clemson and Auburn, but still just a hot start. And obviously, we'll be covering transfer portal, all that. I was going to say fun stuff, but it's not really a lot of fun for some people. But appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time.